Uh,
Mm-hmm.
we shot using the Super 8 cam. So we have to be very precise in shooting because we are using only around 5 rolls of films or 3 rolls. So we have to be we edited it pre-edited. So we shot it very carefully. And
Did
so,
you have like shot list what you wanted to make or to shoot?
we don't have a shot list. We just went around town and around Manila, Metro Manila, and then we shot some scene. So it happens spontaneously.
Mm-hmm. And why crawling?
Yeah, because you know the present situation. It's somehow related to political situation during the AIDS revolution, and somehow there's going on and crawling because maybe there is no transportation. Especially north, we have to find transportation, and yes, we were just shooting it by just commuting. So we have to commute from Moelpan, that is in Cubao, and we commute to Metro Manila, to other parts of Manila. So somehow it's a conceptual work. So we just after to call and call without makulangan.
Mm-hmm. And how big was your crew at that time?
Very big. We are just around 5 of us going around the city, and we shot I think we shot it just for 3 days. 3 days plus editing and everything. So we finished very quick.
Mm-hmm. And we saw different locations. Like we see the city, and
Yes.
then we see at the end we see a sea landscape.
Landscape.
Is that all like part of like the sea, no? Or
oh yes,
like this rocky.
Yeah, that sea is it's a very memorable place because that's where the film center was situated. There's a film center around that. At the back of film center, we shot at the back of film center, and it's very near to the sea.
Mm-hmm.
Film center, it's a very controversial building. Have you heard of this story about it?
Oh,
No.
I would
During
love to.
Marcos regime, Emilda, while constructing the building to finish it during the experimental cinema of the Philippines, many workers were died because the building collapsed. And Emilio Marcos has to finish the building, so they had to they don't spend much time, or they were not able to recover the bodies of the workers. I think it's around 100 workers who died during the construction of Manila Film Center. That's another story.
Yeah. And that happened before you shot that shot there, or
After, before the.
No, after because the film center was constructed
After.
in time for the film festival. That's why there was a rush to finish it.
Yes.
Yeah. So the one Gapang was made what, 87?
86.
Yes.
86?
86, 87. It was 87.
Mm-hmm.
During the Ingo Petchke workshop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would like to also ask about this workshop before we continue again talking about individual works. Like, it's very interesting that there are so many workshops going on in the region, like not only the Philippines, right? Why, can you tell us like why and how these workshops were designed and done? in those days, like mid 70s, early 80s. No, in this case, even mid 80s, right? What was your experience?
I think it was because during those times, Getty Institute was very active in sponsoring these kinds of workshop. So we were given free films, and we were able to finish it by just we don't have to pay anything, just they sponsored everything. So we were very lucky during those times because of this workshop conducted by the German embassy. So with Ob-Eks smelter, of course, during those times, independent filmmaking or just starting the Philippines was very active during this time because of, I think, because of Ob-Eks smelter.
Uwe had something to say.
Yes, yes.
Sure.
Unmute.
Hi, Charo, Charo.
Just a
Okay,
short correct.
he's fine.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just a short additional remark to what Roxlee just said. Actually, it was never the German embassy, because the German embassies never have any mandate in cultural cooperation. That is from our governmental side exclusively with the Goethe Institute. But the embassy always supported this work a lot. Rox, you others, you remember, when was it, 1988? You just mentioned the dreadful history of the Manila Film Center.
Yes.
We know all the story, and somehow it was a pity because it was not used because of the many dead people buried inside, and a cruel act by Imelda. But we made a kind of exorcism in 1980, 89, when we got 1.5 million Deutschmark from the German government to restore the last surviving print of Jerry De Leon's Noli Me Tangere from 1961. Yeah, that was by then it was a revolutionary restoration work. The film was considered to be lost forever, but we made it. The German Federal Archive was able to restore it within 1 year. Then we handed the new version, or the restored version, over to Korea Kino, and the gala premiere was in the film center, and I was able to engage Cardinal Sin, Jaime Sin, to do the opening with a kind of not exorcism, but he gave some holy water, and he spoke a prayer in the memory of the many victims buried in that center, and that was a kind of relief. Since then, work came back also to the Manila Film Center.
Wow.
Mm.
So back to Rox now. Like, what were your experience with this workshop, aside from that you had support, like funding, material to create your work, but what did you experience as the exchange of knowledge at that time?
Because during those workshops, we were able to experiment about the films. For example, the workshop about the optical printing. So we were able to experience those things, and which we cannot do in mainstream cinema. For example, we just gather some or find some trash film, and then put some colors on it or scratch on it, and then we shoot it again in another film. That is the optical printing. So we were able to do something with very minimal budget. So at the same time, we were able to experience many things, experiment on filmmaking.
Because it's a similar process to what we heard previous edition from Gotot, by using track and or leftover films and like drawing on I'm actually very curious if how does drawing play in all this? Because like in ABCD we saw, and in some other films are like comic based. They're
Cartoon.
call them animation, but they're comic based.
Yes, yes. Some because I try to insert some illustrations and cartoons in those films. For example, ABCD. I just do it in bond papers, so pen and ink or mixed media or the pastel color. So and the pictures. Sometimes I integrated with the found footages of pictures. So shot in Super 8, we were able to move it like an animated film. So we incorporate everything, mix and
When you work with pictures, like not painting on film, but for example, using the cartoon frames or caricatures, or also in the film inserts, you use lots of photographs.
photographs and
Yeah. How do you actually work? Like, do you put pictures and photos on one table and like move with your camera, or you don't even shoot it yourself? We'd be very interested in understanding how you work, because nowadays you can just move a mouse on your desk and then finish.
we using this Super 8, so we just put like we put it, a tripod. So tripod and the drawing. So it's like shooting by automatic. So automatic shoot. So the camera runs automatically. So we put the drawings and then another drawings and then another drawing. So it's very simple.
Wow, that's good. But how do you, because we don't have, for example, this is very basic question. We don't have shadows, for example, on those pictures. So you must have carefully also pick the place, yeah, so that the lighting falls right. And
Actually, there are shadows. There are shadows. It just sometimes it was just you just
Yeah.
don't see it very much, but there are many
Yeah.
shadows.
yeah,
It's
so I have yet to note down those shadows. And how did
Sometimes
you yeah, sorry,
some of
go on.
them are shot by natural lighting. So we just calculate the sun and then position the pictures or drawings and then shoot it. Until now, I'm still doing it with the digital camera,
Yeah.
not the separate, but the digital camera. Even in animation, even without tripod, especially the digital cam, you can shoot it in by just available lights.
Yeah.
Of course.
And when you shoot, how many people work there? Do you always work by yourself, or you have like other people working with you?
Most of the time, I just, especially with animation, I just work by myself. So I can manage. But with some other scene, for example, the live one couple, I have to, with the help of some friends, we shot together around 5 or 6 of us.
I'm also interested in looking with, particularly with One Gapang, like performance art tradition. But is it where it's rooted, or is it more rooted to like demonstrations and protests?
Somehow it's that's true. It's like performance. It's like a street performance. So just at the same time, it's an exercise. Exercise film. So the characters is prodding and it's like exercising and performing at the same time. Wow, it's that dog. What's the name of the dog?
The dog is BB.
Bibi, that's the movie.
I'm interested in the crossover with the visual art scene. Actually, that's why I was asking whether that it's rooted in performance or demonstration, because I know that in the 80s, quite a lot of artists from Indonesia meet in Manila. Actually more under the, what was the organization? It was a theater organization, Merv.
Maybe.
Peta.
Peta.
Yeah. I mean,
Peta.
they met under that banner, under that umbrella with PETA. It starts from theater. It's about conscientization, Paulo Freire term. But apparently some of the artists' testimony, at least on this side, they would say that they came into how would you call it? Like a workshop that teaches you how to do demonstrations. So this is
To do a demonstration. So,
oh, that was the workshop. I thought it was a theater or arts or something.
Obi has something to say. Obi.
Yeah, so I do not want to interrupt, but please allow me shortly to remind you what I wrote you before, since I was scheduled originally that the meeting would take place at 2:00 p.m. here in Berlin. Now we're an hour later, and I told you I very latest have to quit this meeting at 4:30. That means in a roughly 40 minutes latest. I have to quit because half an hour later, I have a board meeting. I'm the president of the German Korean Association, and we have an online board meeting at exactly 5:00, and I still have to get into that. So please understand, I apologize, but since Merv wrote me some nice questions, and he told me that he still wanted to talk with it, I'm still here, but I latest have to leave in maximum 40 minutes.
So Merv, can you start your presentation now?
Yes.
Whoa, really? Actually, it covered a lot of ground already. Uh, like, maybe I can, okay, I can skip, and then I want to concentrate on some questions on Uwe.
Some of us do need the background, please.
Okay, fine. Yeah. So this is more or less a historical kind of accounting of, because Rox shared a lot of his materials with us. So
sorry to interrupt. I don't see you anymore. I have here now how to perform in front of a lizard.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
That's the lizard. Do you see?
Yeah, okay, fine. Beautiful photo.
Yeah. How old were you, Rox?
Maybe high school.
Cute.
So this was part of the Rox archives that he lent us. This was in the Papaya archives. And then this one, Rox, where was this? Was this in the 70s?
Yeah, that's in UP, the old fine arts.
What 70s? Were you already in Jingle?
Yes. So that's around 78, 79.
So like there was some initial questions about like Rox's background, what did he actually study? Then he actually studied architecture, right, Rox?
Yeah, but I failed. I wasn't able to finish it. Only 2 years. 2 years.
So, and then Rox started contributing illustrations to this like really famous magazine that a lot of artists and intellectuals from the Philippines were contributing to. It's called Jingle. Ooh, but now I can't change my screen.
78, 79.
Yeah, so this is like a page from Jingle. This is not your work, no?
Oh, yeah.
This It is, no? Wow, a bit different, the style. So Rox started contributing here late 70s, 79.
79, I think it was in
Mm. And then he like, oh, and then this is our catalog of some of the jingle because I can't find some single shots. And then he was also contributing comic strips regularly to National Daily, the Philippine Daily Inquirer. So these are some of the scans, and you can see the water damage because they came from Ondoy in
uh,
2009. No?
2009. It was 2009.
Yeah.
Super typhoon.
Yes. So Rox's house was flooded until the second floor. Yeah, Rox. I think yeah. But before we go into further about the comics, Uwe was telling us a little bit about like giving an alternative to like the kind of cinema that was being presented in the Philippines. I think like everyone knows about the Philippine New Wave from the 80s, like Lino Broca, Ishmael Bernal. But actually, like we during the same time period, we produced a lot of bomba, with a lot of softcore porn. So this was also a kind of mainstream. This is the kind of material that Mole Fund was presenting an alternative to what the Goethe Institute workshops and that partnership with Mole Fund were giving an alternative to. Oh, and this is Scorpio Nights. This is actually produced by the Experimental Cinema of the Philippines. It was remade into this Korean film. And more information if you want. I just put it out there. But Uwe, actually, I'm gonna go to this a bit chronologically. 1983. It was actually this Tronong Puti was produced in a workshop by Mole Fund in collaboration with Ateneo University. And around the same time, I think Goethe was also already collaborating with people, especially like Kidlat Tahimik. Maybe do you know like about how your predecessors were also like pursuing cultural activities? Can you give us a little background?
Yes, that is correct. My predecessor by then was Mr. Gerrit Bretzler, and he had already contacts into the film scene, especially into the independent experimental film scene. And one of the leading figures by then and later also, of course, was Kidlat Tahimik. And actually, Kidlat was the first filmmaker 24 hours after I landed in the Philippines, who I met already in the hotel together with my predecessor. They had sporadic workshops or film events and film workshops, but not yet really in the productional sense. But what was important already by then, especially through Kidlat, who already had very good relations to people like Ulrich Gregor in Berlin, no? To the Deutsche Kinemathek, etc., and to many other institutions in Germany. This was, so to say, a kind of door opener also for me, but going deeper into the business, knowing the whole community, the whole young film community, the independent community, the famous filmmakers I also met within the first days and weeks of my stay in the Philippines. And then as I said earlier, then it came up that we decided in a conceptual long plan to develop these production workshops to help the independent film scene in the Philippines, which dozens and dozens of enormous talents, all of you among them, to do the best what we could, and so that they could not only shoot their film, produce their films, but that they were able to bring these films through our help and others. France later entered the business, England, etc., also to the international film scene, mainly in Europe.
Thank you for that. But actually, also even before the workshops, some young artists were also already experimenting with film, and one of them is in like with us tonight. See Raymond. Raymond,
Yes.
Raymond, because you started making films before the Goethe workshops.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, of course, there were already first steps, of course. Raymond was one. I mentioned Kidlat, who and then was already the oldest one among this group. But Raymond and others. No? Rox, when did you do your first film?
I think 1983.
83, no?
Yeah.
You see, the same.
So this is the one that I'm
Yeah,
showing.
Tronongputi. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Tronongputi was one of the first films I ever saw in the Philippines.
And actually, there's this other person involved in this film that's a bit famous now. Do you know this guy?
Dante Mendoza.
He is now known around the world as Brillante Mendoza.
Yeah, sure, of course. If you read our older correspondence on the occasion of the 40th birthday of Mobile Fund, I mentioned Brillante. He was already, I still remember him and others. No, this was the group of young people who felt attracted then by the Goethe Institute. Once we made it clear, we are decided to bring you up to help you to shoot and to produce films and to link you with the short film scenery and experimental film scenery in the world. Yeah. And of course, they ended up in Venice and Berlin. Of course, when I met him a few years ago, Brillante here in Berlin, he remembered every step of these years. Yeah.
Rox, how was it like working with Brillante back in that time? That Ateneo workshop?
Yes. He's very good actually in production designing by the time. So with very minimal budget, he was able to come up with this very good production design. It looks like expensive, but actually not very
expensive.
So very little budget, you come up with good design.
Like Teddy or Raymond, were you involved in this workshop, in this 1983 workshop?
Only those people registered to that workshop. Where's Teddy? Teddy.
Yeah.
And then, but The Great Smoke was not produced in a workshop.
Yeah, I did it with my separate, with expired film. That was it, an expired film.
How did you get the film?
I bought it here, somewhere in Cainta. I think I bought it one film by that time, I think 100 pesos, 3 minutes.
Wow. How many rolls of film was this?
I bought around 3 rolls.
Wow.
So 9 minutes. So I came up with the 6-minute finished product. It was processed in the Philippines before because we still not processing separate. But now we don't have the machine. And I shot this in a garage.
Your garage?
Yeah, in a garage. And so before, and another place.
Mm. But the credit is with Monly, just like your comics. How
Yes.
was Monly involved?
I'm just on moral support.
Did he give you money?
Merienda and food.
And then, but inserts was part of a mobile fund workshop.
Maybe, but I don't know because I was just getting some found footages. So I have the camera and I have the still one roll of films. I think 2 rolls of film. So I shot anything.
Mm, it was inserts. Then ABCD was not in a workshop.
Yeah. Also, I did it by my own.
I think you said this that you produced this to enter a competition.
No. I just made it.
Hi Merv.
Yes.
You remember
Yeah,
the-
I unmuted the mic na.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I was going to say something when you were
Yeah, I was asking you stuff.
earlier.
Yes. Please.
No, because that's what's interesting because I also started in 1983. So it's about the same time. In fact, I remember Tronong Puti in the same short film festival, the very first one I entered, the Experimental Cinema of the Philippines short film festival. So yes, Roxlee, that's when I first met Roxlee. And also through the Mowal Fund Film Institute, which originally was housed at the Manila Film Center in the same building.
near the sea.
Near the
So
sea.
Film Institute, the Mowal Fund Film Institute was originally first there, and then in 1986 it moved to that Quezon City property.
But you never actually took a workshop, Raymond, no?
No, I took a workshop at the UP Film Center.
Yeah.
And then I started joining the competitions with Roxlee.
You were competitors.
And that's why I feel so old because I look back in this movement, and when I meet my friends, colleagues, most of them were actually my students when I was teaching Molfan, except Roxlee.
Wow.
So Roxlee's the only, and of course Kidlat Tahimik. So
Yeah.
we all looked up to Kidlat as the father of independent, alternative cinema. So I always joke, Roxlee, you're the only filmmaker in our group who wasn't my student.
Your first film, the Mapakailanman.
Yeah. So that was that same year with Tronong Puti. Same year. Super 8. So
yeah, and then like Uwe came in 85, and then 86. That was the revolution, and then the date on this work is actually also 86. The Lizard.
Lizard is 86, yeah.
86.
And then it features a soundtrack by who is it?
Nina Hagen.
Yeah, Nina Hagen.
It's,
German.
Yeah.
Do you know him, Obing? Her. Do you know her?
Not personally, no.
I thought he was your ex-girlfriend.
Our ex what? I didn't get that.
No, it's a joke. Obing. It's a joke.
Okay.
Can you tell us about this, Rox? I mean, did you start making Lizard right after EDSA?
After, I think it was during the optical printing workshop.
No, optical printing was with Christoph. This is Ingo Petschke.
With Christoph.
But this is Ingo Petschke.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. And maybe like maybe you can tell us about how you selected the instructors, Uwe, because like some of the works here, a lot of them are Ingo Petschke, Berger Bustorff,
This one with
Christoph Janetsko. Yeah, this is Ingo Petschke.
workshop.
And then Harun Faroki also.
Yeah,
How
he was.
did you?
Yeah, I wanted to mention him earlier. Harun Faroki was one of the first ones, and he gave a strong impetus. Then came in Ingo Petzke, then Christoph, then Mickey Wolfes, Christian Weissenborn, Michael Ballhaus, the cinematographer, etc., etc. Helga
Thomas Mauch.
Borsche, the world-famous editor, Psygoder, Rainer Psygoder, the sound engineer from Hollywood, and the best of the best, yeah.
Yeah, 1986.
But yeah, how did you go about selecting them? How involved were you directly, or how much of that was also an influence of like the mechanism of the Goethe?
Well,
Institute?
this was quite easy. My concept was always learn as much as possible about the wishes of your partners and the filmmakers in the Philippines, and let them tell me their wishes, and then we acted accordingly. You know, sometimes we proposed also people, yeah, so it was a taking and giving, no? But we normally, in 80-90% of the cases, we followed the wishes and suggestions of the young filmmakers, of our partners. Yes.
So like Raymond, Teddy, were you aware of like these instructors before they came?
No, not really.
No, I'm not aware. In fact, I don't know them very much.
Except maybe Thomas Mauch.
Yeah, Thomas Walker,
Thomas Mauch.
Thank you.
Who had
Also,
yeah,
famous
quite
cinematographer.
a reputation for himself. So
Yes,
we
yes.
somewhat heard of him already.
yeah.
Hey,
Maybe we should also mention, even if he never managed his own workshop with you, but so to say, today we might call him a strong influencer under those circumstances, was Werner Schröter, of course, you know.
Yes, because he came in 1980,
Yeah.
81.
No?
Yes,
And he was the one with the laughing star.
exactly.
No? His famous film referring to the disaster during the construction of the Manila Film Center. You know, when he still was documenting the show with President Reagan and Nancy Reagan and Imelda Marcos, no? In the newly opened, that was the only target by then. Imelda wanted to have that within no time, and therefore it collapsed, and the tragedy was there. Yeah. And Werner Schröter picked that item up, and therefore he was banned by Imelda from the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Werner Schreuter was mostly initially visiting the UP Film Center through
Exactly.
Virgie Moreno. That's where I first
yeah.
met him with Peter
As I
Kern.
said, he never guided a workshop of our work. That's true.
But around this time also, there was a lot of Asian artists who were coming and going, sometimes hosted also by the UP. Like, did you guys meet them? Like for example, Gotot Prakosa was mentioned. Like, he came in the 80s, and I remember Kidlat saying that he hosted him in Baguio. Did you know how those came about?
Did you know them? There's Teddy Ko.
What?
Teddy,
What
unmute.
Were you asking me?
Teddy.
Eddie.
No, Uwe should know because he used to he makes all these invitations. You know, he proposes them.
But
Yeah.
the Asians who came through.
Yeah, but because I was working at Mole Fund, you know, I would also have a lot of. I also negotiated a lot of these visits, no, with whoever was the director, especially with Uwe, no, because under Uwe's term, I think we had a real golden age of all these
Yes.
German filmmakers coming over, no? Either to do workshops or to just show their films. And but even during the time of Dr. Bretzler, Uwe's predecessor, some of them were coming already, no, including
Yeah. Yeah, as I mentioned, exactly.
Rosa von Fronheim, and then Michael Wolfes, Christian Weissenborn, who were documentary filmmakers.
Yeah, they came several times, no?
They came several times. Even Schroeter came here quite a few times, no? Once to attend the Manila International Film Festival.
Yeah.
To present
Every
Desperado.
year. Every year.
Yeah, and then to make his film, no? Even Werner Herzog was here with Klaus Kinski during the Manila International Film Festival. But that I don't know if that was under the auspices of the Goethe Institute. But that was 1983. No?
Going back to
So there's a book, no?
yeah.
Do you all remember the book Kino Cine?
Yes.
It documents many of these visits. It's written by Dr. Tilman Baumgartel, no? I think there's still some copies at the Goethe Institute.
But
I didn't get that.
There's a book that came out. I think after Uwe had left, maybe I think in the mid '90s, called Kino Cine. Kino / Cine, yeah.
No, exactly. That was 2000s already, Teddy. That was already in the 2000s.
2000, yeah.
Yeah.
But my question was more like, how did Asian, particularly Southeast Asian participants came? Because there's like a Gary Nugroho, for example, he came over in the late 80s or 90s?
No, that's 86.
Yes.
No, because that workshop was, of course, organized by the Goethe Institute with the Mole Fund again. And it was proposed that it be a Southeast Asian filmmaking workshop. So Southeast Asian participants were included, including Garin Nugroho. No?
Exactly.
And Garin Nugroho, he was not yet Garin Nugroho. He just showed a documentary film on the Komodo dragons. That was even before his first feature film. And then we had somebody from Thailand who was
Indonesia.
In fact
Indonesia.
Thailand.
Yeah, but also Indonesia.
Yeah, Garin Nugroho is from
Indonesia. Was Garin Nugroho.
Exactly.
And from Thailand, in fact, was a prince. He was royalty, no? But because the royal family was making films, that was he had a very long name. And then we had somebody from Malaysia too, and another guy from Thailand again, no? And then Raymond Red was there too for the Philippines.
Yeah.
And so it seems that a lot of like for a while in the 80s, in the mid 80s, like the Philippines became like this film workshop center.
If I may say a last word, exactly, Merv. That is the point, because what Teddy just mentioned correctly, and what you just said, if you remember, these workshop series developed very early a kind of magnetism, which was deeply in our all of our interests, no? And so the first one came from other countries, even nearly 20 years later. When I was in Korea and Japan, they still remembered these birth cradles, so to say, in the Philippines. And meanwhile, then Tokyo Wonder Side took over. They joined these things. So it was a kind of widespreading roots, which developed very early, 85, 86, 87 in the Philippines. And that was one of the most wonderful and really happy, most lucky developments in this area. And I think we all still, how do you say, we're still enjoying that, and it grew. It never felt dry, and the results are known.
Thank you. Anyway, moving forward to because you mentioned the 86 workshop. Now we come to the Burger Bustorff workshop of 87. Were there Southeast Asians involved in this workshop, or
No,
was it mostly?
that was all Filipino.
Filipinos.
So was this the guy on the picture right now? Is this at Makulangan?
Yes, that's
At Makulangan
No,
is a famous
that's June.
photographer. June. Okay.
Did Rox? Did you mention it?
June.
It was played by two actors.
Yeah, there's two people. Yeah.
One Gapang was played by two different actors. I think this is June Castillo. He was a filmmaker also.
So like Rox was saying, no, these guys would go around the city taking jeepneys with white paint all over them.
Yeah.
How was that like? What were people reacting?
They are shouting at us sometimes, like "Loko loko, loko loko."
Crazy. And it's credited to Yeye and At Makulangan. How was the collaborations like?
And some of the first one complained about the painting because we are using latex paint, and it's very not good to the body. The perspiration cannot out. So it was really very hot. So he was complaining about the latex paint all over his body.
Anyway, moving forward, there's also
This film was
Kalamay.
lost, Obi. Before when we were in Germany, Berlin, Merv and I were able to find this film.
So apparently, actually, I have to thank some resources from I think I got this from Teddy and Raymond back in the day, that there's like catalogs of the Arsenal. And I have a Xerox of them. And then it indicates a list of films that are in the possession of the Arsenal. So around 2017, when we were preparing an exhibition at the HKW, at the Haus der Kulturen der Welt, with Rox participating with his archive, the friend David Tay, curator for the Misfits exhibition, he personally went to the Arsenal and then he asked for these films. They already because actually Raymond and Kidlat are a bit more famous than Rox. They said like, oh, no one has actually asked for these films since the 80s. So they found them, and then we were able to reunite Rox with them, and they were excited, and they did the transfers for free. So, Rox, can you tell us about this film? Like, what is Kalamay, and why is there like footage of this?
Yeah, it's just a sort of a ritual, ritual. I was able to shoot some ritual, but it came from Julie Ayala's dance group. They are performing somewhere in Metro Manila, and I just shot some dancing scenes. So and I try to integrate it with some found footages. The beauty parade, very old footages. So
where is this footage from? Like this beauty parade?
Kalamay, because of like mix up and all those things, and Kalamay is food. No relation at all.
But how were you so? Yes.
I feel terribly sorry to interrupt again, but I'm horribly afraid that as I announced earlier, please understand, my time unfortunately has to be over. So if you would still have a very fast and last question, then let me know. Otherwise, I would have to say goodbye. I'm terribly sorry. I would love to spend the whole night with you, but please understand, the people are already knocking on my door here.
Uwe, the last question for you is from one of the participants, Aryo Danusiri, who was the head of the Goethe Institute in Jakarta at the moment.
Who?
Do you know? Who was heading the Goethe Institute in Jakarta at that moment?
In the 80s, who was your counterpart?
Yes, if you know.
Yeah, I didn't understand the name, but fine. The director of Goethe Institute Jakarta. Fine, yeah.
No, I'm asking you the name. If you
I don't
know.
know.
Okay.
Sorry, no,
No
I don't
problem.
know actually. I know his predecessor. I'm not even sure if it's not a lady at the moment. I have to look it up. Sorry, I don't have all the.
I think Ario's question was who was
Back then.
back then in the 80s, your counterpart.
Yeah.
Back then. Yeah. Oh, good question. I see him in front of my eyes. What was his name? He made quite a good career later in the head office. Sorry, I have forgotten his name, but I can look it up. I feel terribly sorry. I've forgotten his name. A very, very close friend of mine, but actually the name is not present.
Good.
And he joined. He supported from also the colleague in Malaysia, etc. Later, people in Singapore showed up, and yeah. So as I said earlier, the magnetism which these workshop series produced.
I have one last question, because this is related to the latter part, actually. Because when I think one of the instructors that seemed to be common in a lot of these workshops in different places, not just in Asia but also in Brazil, for example, or even that's also why I invited you to Glasgow. Because
thank you.
Because Christoph did a workshop there with the Goethe Institute. How did this network come about? How did his name became so popular?
Yeah, I think the explanation is relatively easy. If you, whatever it is, if you do a good job, if you come to good results with professional and engaged partners, if the results are presentable, if the results are reproduced and distributed, of course that attracts people. And film community is a global one. It has always been. And even in the 80s and 90s, it was already very, very dense. Only the Philippines were a little bit behind. And this gap we were able to close immediately, since the people knew there are fantastic filmmakers in the Philippines, up to the young experimental and independent filmmakers. And as I said, this developed a kind of interest, of curiosity, of magnetism to come to. Do you remember how many times just Ulrich Gregor came to Manila only in my years, because he said, Uwe, this is getting so exciting, the young filmmaking in the Philippines. And people like this, they are multiplicators, like you, the young people and the older ones. And this is my explanation. And later we had, as I told you earlier, I had the echoes of these pilgrim years and its developments. I still had that in South Korea. I still had it in Japan. And then I learned it goes up to the United States and to other countries. And that brought the Philippines up and the young people, all of you. Yeah, this is the kind of, today you call it networking. By then it was simply the mouse-to-mouse propaganda and the experience on festivals, etc., etc. It's a conglomerate of many factors which come together.
One last question, sorry,
but
before you
please
go.
Quick, because
how were these films in Germany? How involved were you in this, like in getting these works involved in the festivals there? Because
we made whole Filipino programs, and I offered them to the short film festivals up to the Berlinale. No, not a huge package, but the Berlinale more and more picked up selected films from the Philippines, up to the large one, up to the Golden Bear, but also from your films. And the key event was, when was it? 88, 87, when you got your first Oscar nomination for one of these short films of a good Institute production workshop. That was a kind of bottle opener. And of course, then you know how the film world works. They are curious. Schmelter, can you bring the films over? It started with Germany, of course, no? But then we had already a close EU, European Union cultural cooperation also. And so we launched the films into other countries, France, Italy, Great Britain, etc., etc.
Thank you.
Uwe, before you
We will-
leave,
okay.
Yeah.
just to greet you, and it's been so long. I haven't seen you in 30 years.
Yes.
Teddy. Yeah,
Nice
well, we
reunion.
have to see.
Yeah, yeah.
Make me work and bring me somehow to the Philippines, and then
This is
the rest,
my secret
the rest will
agenda.
come by itself.
I wanted to force a reunion.
Yeah, please, please do. Yeah. Now make me work and let's do something together. I'm always here.
Thank you very much,
Okay.
Uwe.
Very much.
Thank
Uwe.
you. Thank you.
I have to thank all of you. It was wonderful. It was heart touching for me. Thank you very much. And I hope to see you very soon. And let's go on with this kind of
Oh,
work.
look, there is a picture of you.
You have a portrait by
Rox made a
Rox.
picture of you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Rox.
Very cute, very
Rox,
cute.
you have to send that to me. I still have another picture of you here in my collection.
I shared
Drawing
it
of-
through Facebook.
Yeah, Uwe, you have a portrait written drawn by Larry Alcala during your farewell dinner before you left
It's
Manila.
here. It's here at my side of my writing desk. Yeah.
2 years ago, he
Yeah.
was proclaimed a national artist of the Philippines.
Yeah, and we have your hand drawing, which is called drought. You know, with these when the water was in. Yeah. So nothing has gone lost. Nothing. Okay, my dear friends, please understand, and I apologize again in all form. I would love to spend the night with you, even if it's only on the video screen, but I have to quit now.
So
Thank you so much for making it.
Thank you.
Thank all of you, and hopefully until very soon. Mabuhay and magandang gabi.
See you again. See you again, Uwe.
See you, dear friends. A big, big hug to everybody.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Uwe.
Bye, Uwe.
Bye.
Oh. Actually,
Okay.
towards the tail end, I think my observation is like Goethe seemed to taper off, and then the influence of other organizations and other nation states became more apparent. I think Singapore and Hong Kong and Japan became much more prominent towards the late 80s.
No, Merv, this is how it works. Each
Okay.
cultural agency, whoever is running, whoever is the ambassador, the director, it depends on his sphere of interest.
Mm.
And it so happened Uwe's field was film. Because before he came to Manila, he used to run the film department at the Goethe Institute in Munich. That's why he knew so many of his filmmakers.
Mm.
They were his friends, personal friends. So we brought them over. It depends, because there was one Goethe Institute director who was very interested in dance. And during his 3-year term, it was all dance people coming over.
Mm. Yes. I remember.
But big names, like
Yeah.
Sasha Waltz.
Yes.
And all this inviting other Southeast Asian artists, was that also a personal interest from these so-called ambassadors, or those are more like standard procedure at that time?
Well, there are two ways to look at it. One is they look at it as this visits by German experts, as collaborations, as partnerships between their countries and the local country. But there are also other ways of thinking about it. There have been some directors who also think, why don't we make it a Southeast Asian thing? And I think this happened in 1986, with the Harun Farooqi workshop, in which there were participants from Indonesia, that was Garin, Thailand, Malaysia, and Philippines.
Mm.
And I think it also became, I don't know if you were aware of Chop Shots documentary film festival. No? That was like 2010, 2011, 2011.
2011.
Right. That period also, we had a lot of inter-ASEAN participation going on, no?
Mhm.
Because it was the policy of the whoever was the head of the Goethe Institute, no? And during that period, I think the shots were being called from Jakarta because your Goethe Institute head, I forgot his name, was the one who was
At that time
handling the whole
was
of Southeast Asia, no? The program for Southeast
Franz
Asia.
Xava. Franz Xava.
Mm.
What was his last name? Xava. Yeah,
Agustin,
was his first
Agustin.
name. Agustin.
Franz
That's right.
Agustin.
Franz
Yeah.
Xava Agustin.
You know,
Yeah.
he came over. That's why I remember him.
Mhm.
Before he went to Myanmar.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or there's a
Yes. So it's always this pendulum, yeah, going between what was the institutional policy and the interest
Yeah.
of people holding the office.
You know, so you know, if they have a personal interest, for example, Schmelter, he was very interested in film, so he brought in a lot of film programs. You know, but you also have some directors who are just not interested. They just bring in whatever is sent to them.
Ano ka dilim? Yung makadilim o paliwanag.
there's a question from Yong.
Ano mo liwanag?
He asked,
Tama naman. Hindi naman sa pinipindutan. Wala naman sana.
yes, I missed it. Were there any women filmmakers active in this movement? Could you share with us their works? And was there any contribution for aspiring women? Filmmakers.
Well, there was one documentary film workshop, now conducted by Michael Wolfes and Christian Weissenborn. I think this was during Uwe's term as well.
Yes. Ditzi Carolino.
One of the participants, actually she's now one of our superstar documentary filmmakers who sprang from that. She made her first film there. That was Ditzi Carolino. You know? So you might say that, you know, she was kind of German trained because of this workshop. There have been others, of course, but none of them have achieved the prominence of Ditzi Carolino.
I mean, from this generation, later generations, you had people like Kiri Delena,
Mhm.
but these are like late 80s,
Well, this was the documentary workshop of 2012, in which you had Kiri Delena, Baby Ruth Villaraman, Adjani Arumpak, Jewel Maranan. You know, these are now the top names. These are now top names in our independent documentary filmmaking here. And they all gathered in these workshops, well, co-sponsored by the German Goethe Institute with the French Embassy between 2010 to 2013.
Another question from Lisa C, not Lisa Bona. When Roxlee's films were shown in art space or artist-run space or gallery, museum, and what space was this? What was the context of it being showing in an art space?
Guys, I had I found some. It's not in my slides, but I found some documentation of it being shown in Pinaglabanan galleries, which was active in the late 80s. Do you remember the screenings there? Marian Pastor Roses was involved also, and I think there was a residency exchange program. Do you guys remember this?
Merv, I don't specifically remember a specific screening, but there were so many activities with filmmakers collaborating with visual arts, and I remember we did quite a few, events in Pinaglabanan, and I personally I was part of the Manila Berlin exchange artists.
Yes, that's the one I was talking about.
1988, yeah. So, Filipino artists were brought to Berlin, and even a jeepney was there.
Exactly.
Which served as our main service vehicle during the exhibit. I was the only filmmaker. So
and you made a film there.
and I shot the film. Yeah, Pinoy's in
Mm.
Berlin when we were
Yeah.
painting the wall. So that was my contribution to that.
And Pinaglabanan was like one of the organizers or like partners for that, no?
Yeah, yeah, and that's why Agnes Arellano and Michael Adams, they were really sponsoring a lot of arts events. So I don't remember specific events, but I know we were showing our films there. So Rox must have shown his
Yeah.
films quite a lot there.
Can you describe, like, in the 80s, for example, what kind of films were showing in at cinemas, and what kind of films were showing in art galleries, or are they actually quite interchangeable? Because Merv showed some of the posters, right, of commercial films. Like, are those the films that goes to screen at the cinema, or your kind of films could also be screened in the cinemas of that time?
Teddy, I'll answer that.
Go, go.
Teddy can answer, but it was the delineation was very clear back then. No, independent film was underground. So we showed it in galleries, small cinemas, in schools, cinematheques, stuff like that, and we could hardly show it in a real theater setting. For one, is because most of our films were shot on Super 8 and 16 millimeter film. It was very difficult to project it in a big theater. So it was a technical limitation. So for a time, it was unimaginable to see a Super 8 film being shown in a theater. But with all these activities, the workshops and collaborations, and then the Mole Fun Film Institute organizing small festivals, we started looking for venues. So maybe Teddy can talk about it when we had this first independent film and video festival in '86. No.
And Cubao, no?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The one you made a film about.
Right, right. We actually the one person who is not here and who was a lot to say because he was somehow like a kind of an intellectual leader of what we were doing at the time, no, spearheading all these film exhibitions and filmmaking and workshops, and I have to give him credit because, well, he's not here, but I will give him credit for cooking up all these negotiations with the Goethe Institute, with the other embassies. Well, it's Nick De Ocampo, no? Do any of you, I mean, aside from the Filipinos, do you guys know Nick De Ocampo? Yeah. Anyway, he was like a firebrand, and at that time he was also heading the Mole Fund Film Institute. So we did 1986. We did something called the Independent Film and Video Festival, in which we actually gathered all the short films, and a few full-length films that were at the cutting edge, that were really, really outside the mainstream, and and we and Sony, the distributor of Sony in the Philippines, they actually put up the first and only video theater, video cinema, no, still analog, no, pre-digital, and maybe 300, 400 seats. Mm. And they gave it to us to use, and we had the I cannot find the catalog here. It should just anyway. Uh, and we had the film festival. No, it lasted 1 week. No, and in fact we shot a documentary uh, covering that festival, and yeah, um, maybe I mean we called the documentary was called Beyond the Mainstream, because all of these films were actually outside of the mainstream, and at least we made a document out of it, no, a 45-minute film, in which decades later, I think Raymond's still there. Raymond
Yes.
made a full-length fictional, I think highly fictionalized version of it, of what happened. in the 80s.
Yeah, I did it 5 years ago.
Yeah,
So,
the rebels with a
with a case.
case.
Rebels with a case. Is the title.
Right.
But as for other venues, like how often were you using like rock clubs like Red Rocks, for example? I saw this fanzine of Red Racket, like where there's a schedule for the program and it's short, mobile fun short films.
We were able to screen some Super 8 films and Red Rocks. Timog.
Yeah, how regular was that?
I think not very regular, maybe once a year.
That's
But we brought a Super 8 projector and we project it to the wall.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we still did not. At that time, there were no digital projectors. No, now it's so
so
easy.
you bring your own projector.
Yeah. So we were showing a lot of stuff on film, no, 16 or Super 8.
Yeah.
I'm very interested actually to know, like, did you have enough money to make copies for your work, or like, how many copies usually you make out of your work?
For the Super 8 or 16 millimeter like that.
16 for projection.
Super 8, there's usually only one.
Yeah.
And it's the camera original.
Exactly. Yeah.
Flies together. So
copy, only one.
Mm-hmm. And for example, were there any, when it was sent to festivals, for example, do you make other copies, or you send the only copy you have away?
You have to be very careful in sending the film, especially in Super 8. It might not come back.
Exactly.
we were showing the only copies, the original copies for Super 8.
Oh my God.
But some of us were lucky. I mean, I always consider myself lucky. When I showed my Super 8 films in Berlin, everybody was shocked that I was showing the only existing copy. So they gave me a grant, and I was able to make Super 8 duplicate prints in Berlin, because they had these special labs for Super 8. So and actually those prints, I think, are in the arsenal, Merv.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know.
They agreed to make the copy, and then I said, why don't I leave it here so that you can archive it? And it's been there ever since.
But Rox forgot about the ones that were left there. That's why Kalamay was, lost. And
Kalamay was video, right?
no, it's Super 8 in the copy. In the arsenal is Super 8.
So wait, I want to remind Rox that he visited Berlin in 1990.
Yeah, we were together.
We showed films at the Arsenal, and we also attended the Hamburg No Budget Film Festival. There was a Hamburg No Budget Film Festival in 1990. So I was in Berlin, and Rox and Mel Bacani attended the festival with me. So you may have left some of your prints there. I don't know.
Maybe we just started.
Well, I helped program also some of a Roxlee program in Japan, no, Image Forum.
What year?
I have the schedule somewhere here. It's 1990. Rox, anong year ka nasa Tokyo?
93?
92, 91, 93?
Maybe 90s, early 90s.
92.
Okay, 92.
When was this
Also, Tad Ermitanio had the program at Image Forum. I think
Image Forum.
95.
95, right, Tad?
Okay. This is in Tokyo. Yeah.
Yes.
You should speak with your slides.
Oh, this is Yamagata.
Yeah, when you guys were going to Yamagata, I think, what year was this?
93?
No, we were there in 89. 89 and 91.
Yamagata.
Yes, 89, 91, 93.
No, no, 93 was only rocks.
Oh, really?
Uh,
Okay.
Yeah.
And
But
then,
95, we were an entire delegation there.
yes,
With
with that.
Latlamic, with Ad, with, everybody,
That time I have
judges.
already an iPad.
Hmm?
iPad that time, 1993.
That's the festival director, right? Right
Yes,
there in the
exactly.
photo.
Sayano, Kasuyuki
Yana
Sayano.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So,
And
so
there
yeah,
was
so
this photo at a bar, like, or something that looked like a bar.
no, that's a
What
train.
was that?
This one, this one.
No,
That's
no.
steady. That's steady, right?
Walking
Yeah,
down
yeah, that's me, that's me.
the street of Tokyo, I think.
The bar photo was before.
Yeah,
one?
the one with lots of
yeah.
people.
Oh, that's Red Rocks.
Oh yeah, Yamagata.
Hey.
Sorry. Okay. Yamagata, no, that's 99. Anyway, forgot. Yeah, this one, no?
Here.
That's Red Rocks.
Yeah, what is that?
Yeah.
Timog gabi yung Cubao. Ayun.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's an
So
iconic.
tell us what this place is.
It's a bar.
Or was. Maybe it's no longer there.
Red Rocks sa Cubao.
That's the place where we show some of our
This
Timog.
photo.
Timog
Yeah,
Street,
this-
Quezon
yeah.
City.
This photo was still Red Rocks, so this was in Timog.
Timog, yeah.
Yeah,
With the late Cesar Hernando in the center.
exactly. This photo came from him.
Hmm.
Mm.
And what kind of things took place there at that time?
So
They played some rock bands.
It was
It
basically
was
music. Rock
yeah,
music, no?
it was then the rise of alternative
bands.
music, alternative bands, alternative rock. And
Mhm.
so there were these bars. Of course, they had to be legal bars, but it was considered like a kind of like underground in a sense. But it is actually a legal registered bar.
Mm.
Mhm.
But most of the bands playing were alternative musicians who eventually became big commercial successes, like Eraserheads.
In that bar.
You guys were more connected to the punk scene, or was that the zine and the comic times?
Yes, the punk scene was also very
Active
prevalent
around this
during
time.
this time. Sina Papa Dom, di ba?
Oh, man.
And Roxlee is arm wrestling with the legendary pioneers of Filipino rock. Isn't that
Pepe
Pepe
Smith?
Smith?
That's Pepe Smith. Yeah.
It's Pepe Smith.
Yeah. Who actually had a band in Japan in the 70s.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
And then Speed Glue and something? I forgot.
And he's the actor of the Singing in the Graveyard.
Shinky.
Yes.
So mostly legendary people, no? Unfortunately, they've left us already, like Cesar Hernando in the Cap. He's
Little
also
Weapon.
a filmmaker, yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Merv, do you still have more moments to show or works to show?
no,
Or can we actually
go for it.
open the Q&A session
no, go for
very
it.
soon?
Now.
Yeah.
Just if I can just supplement with slides if they have questions related to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go for it. Ask away.
All right. Anyone with questions? There's one comment that Nick De Ocampo was presenting films and doing a talk in 1989 Experimental Film Congress in Toronto from Scott Miller Berry.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I saw documentation of that, or like not documentation, but some like text materials of that last time I was in Toronto. Thanks to Scott.
Yeah, that was one workshop, no, from the 1988 Christoph Ionesco Experimental Film Workshop. That bunch of films actually traveled around the world,
Mm,
and it was
yeah.
presented by different people. Because I remember presenting it at the Berlinale in 1989. You know,
Mhm.
that set of films, and that included Raymond Red's Studies for the Skies, among others,
I
and
saw that.
Roxlee's,
I saw that one at the
Roxlee's,
Arsenal archive.
yeah,
Oh.
and Roxlee's Spit, Spit Optic, yeah,
Yeah.
and a number of other films. They were all shown there at the Arsenal, yes, during the Berlinale in '89. And on the basis of, because that was Janecko's first workshop, with the Goethe Institute. On the basis of those films that were made and shown, he got many more offers from the institute to conduct workshops in so many other places, like in Glasgow
Mm.
and in
Mhm.
Brazil, in maybe
So,
4 other places. And then he came back to Manila to do 2 more workshops.
mm, yeah, that was what I was like getting at a while ago, because it seems that like he was one of the more successful workshop facilitators. So successful that Goethe started to like take him all over the place.
Mm. No, because he was different too, because aside from knowing about film technique, he was a cinematographer. He knows the technical aspect, but he knew film history. He's amazing because he brought his own set of films,
Yeah.
various classics. Remember, this was before digital, no? Before digital, and he did not
So
bring
he actually
videotapes.
carried
He
prints with
carried
him.
prints of
Yeah.
of,
Mm.
of Stan Brakhage films, of
Mhm.
experimental films, whatever, German, and not just German, no, because usually the Goethe Institute will say, "Oh, we'll only show German films," but Christophe brought everything: French films, European films, American
Mhm.
films, and he showed it to all of us. So he was
Mhm.
a very unique combination, no, among all the teachers that we've seen, no, all the experts we've seen, who combined technical know-how with film history. At the same time, he showed us the films. See, so the aesthetic and the technical side.
And the history.
Yes.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. And just out of curiosity, like who are the audience of your films? These so-called independent alternative films of the Philippines in the Philippines at that time. Like who are watching your films?
Fellow
And
filmmakers.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
family and friends.
Family and friends. So it's something between solidarity and home movies. Yeah, in the beginning.
Well, we were promoting it a lot in schools, so
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the audience were students also. So
Like university or high school students?
university, yeah. Actually,
Mhm.
remember Teddy, the Mole Fun Film Institute was visited by a lot of students,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
even from the nearby schools, and so
Right.
they were. This was something really new for them, but at least they were exposed to it. They never knew that, during that time. Remember, there was no such thing as digital, and
Mhm.
so when you say cinema, it's only cinema in the cinemas, in the
Mm.
theaters, right? So this was something so weird and unique for them to see these crude, you know, small films made out of passion and shot on Super 8, and they would come to the Film Institute and watch them. So
No,
it's
no, to put it
yeah.
into context. Now, this in the 80s, you guys, the filmmakers in the 80s, this was the first generation of filmmakers in the Philippines that were coming from the underground, from the doing alternative cinema, outside the mainstream. There was an attempt by some older filmmakers back in the 60s, but I think that fizzled out. That did not really create a movement. But the 80s, I think that really stood well, and historically, and because you have the films, you have the filmmakers. Roxlee is still here, Raymond, Tad,
Yeah.
Ricky Orellana. See, so it's living history, and it's now burgeoned into one big movement. It's like if you come to Manila now, we have so many film festivals, and we have and there's also an experimental thing going on, uh, which uh, which I think is something really it's really expanded. Except I think we should be taking, because we are only looking at those who made it, people like Rox, like Raymond, that and all that. But actually among students, we have a burden. We make maybe 500-600 student films a year, no, and we have, I
Five to
think,
600 student films a year.
500 to 600 or
Okay.
more, no.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm also involved in some of these alternative film festivals.
No.
We have five film festivals here, local film festivals,
Mm-hmm.
spaced out across the year, and we have, there's so much. There's so much actually going on here.
Since we are now at an attempt of contextualizing, I'm going to read Dylan's question. I'm not very familiar with the situation in the Philippines at the time. So this might be a very naive question, but I'm wondering how the Marcos government's authority impacted your work. As in, was there any sort of idea that cannot be seen as subversive, so that we need to push further, be more abstract? Or was this not really coming from any fear about being seen subversive, if that makes sense? I guess I want to add to it, like I previously asked Merv to sort of, probably this is the boring part for the reunion side of the conversation, but how does it work? Like if you screen it in different places, but actually there is a center in which so-called the art happens, or the official art, or the national art, or the allowed art happen, and how are these, like the things that are happening in the center, which is allowed by the government, and the things that are happening elsewhere sporadically, how are they connected or disconnected, if that makes sense?
You're talking of the 80s.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Here are the rules. If you want to show a film, if you show it in a public space, meaning to say a cinema, a real movie house, you need to undergo censorship. No, but for the alternative filmmakers, people like Rox, Raymond, mostly their stuff is shown anyway in either in schools, in bars, you know, in art spaces, art galleries, no, yeah, which if you look under the law are not covered by this rule. It just says public space. Technically, they are public spaces, but they are not movie houses. Real movie houses in which there's a projector, there's a screen, there's a paying audience. You need to undergo censorship. So many of these films were able to bypass the law as long as they got shown in these alternative spaces, and also because they did not attract too big a crowd.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at least we had that free space.
Yeah, but to add to that, what's strange is two major government institutions actually unknowingly sponsored the movement. Because we were submitting the films to the Experimental Cinema of the Philippines, which was housed at the Manila Film Center. It's run by the government. But it's obvious that the government didn't even care what was happening. They just funded it. So they didn't know that there were quite subversive short films, political films, Super 8 films being shown in that festival. And they were even winning the awards. As well as the Cultural Center of the Philippines, which is a project of Imelda Marcos. They started holding the alternative short film festival in 1987, no? And that practice continued. Basically, it was happening under their noses. So they didn't know there were such films emerging from these festivals and movements of artists.
Yeah, so these are state-sponsored, no? State-sponsored film festivals, competitions. with actual prize money given to the winners. And I mean, Raymond and Roxlee, you know, they kept winning awards in some of these festivals, and that was actually that has to be a factor, no, and why many of these films also got made, because there was state sponsorship of this festival. It was a big incentive. The cultural center alternative film event actually started in '87. Up to now, it's still running. You know, it's still running. So that's good. That's good for us.
So it's a bit sad saying in the chat box. But if you brought a projector and a bunch of films, nobody knew about it. Nobody would put it. It was a matter of enforcement. So it's a similar situation to the social media. Like the ones that are screened in the official censorship, but the ones that cinema pinggiran or cinema ngamen do not have to go through all this process.
Yeah, but I think that if you charged money, and you would actually have to go through the censorship body, the MTRCB. But if you didn't, then basically it would be impossible to censor you, because if you brought your films and a bunch of and your own projector to a place, then basically the cops, nobody was interested enough to forbid you. So Red Rocks, that was where I was involved in that bar a lot. There was a lot of screenings there, and I think even also in JP Manukan, this chicken place where we did, and when Rox had his own projector, Reggie had his own projector. You could just have guerrilla screenings on the street, literally project like out on the street, and basically it was invisible to the cops. It was just considered a party.
That was the Cine Calle.
Yeah, Cine Calle.
Cine Calle literally means like cine is movies and calle is street.
Yeah, yes.
Street cinema.
Cinema, street cinema.
I guess what needs to be pointed out is the government. When you say the government, of course the top people in power and controlling the institutions, they were clueless to what was happening. So you could shoot out on the street like Roxlee shooting one gapang. You won't be able to do that today. I mean, cops will immediately question you what you're trying to do on the streets. But back then you could get away with that. People were just amused by what they're seeing.
Was
and
it
then
because
maybe the simplest thing is whenever they approach that, we say, it's a student project that we're doing, and they just stop bothering you.
We still say student project.
Yeah, it was.
It still works for us.
It kind of worked. It still worked until the early 2000s, but then digital came in and independent filmmaking exploded, and suddenly everybody knew what indie film was. Even the cops would approach you and say, "Hey, what's that? Is that a Cinemalaya indie film?" They would question you on the street like that. That means suddenly everybody was familiar. But I remember in 1999 when I shot Anino, my short film, which I shot on 35 millimeter. So I had quite a few people helping, carrying the big 35 millimeter camera. A cop approached us and I said, "This is a student film," and he just walked away. Even though there were quite a number of us with this big camera. But now you can't do that. It's impossible to do that. So imagine in the 80s it was that loose and that free. Even though in the early 80s, like up to 85, 86, we were technically still under martial law.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that the kind of films, at least the filmmakers who are here present, are more of the experimental, artsy-fartsy kind. So I don't think the cops would bother with that. But we do have a strain of documentary filmmaking, which is very, very militant,
Right.
very agitprop, very anti-government. which get made and which get shown. No, but that's another set of filmmakers you have to talk about with. You know?
You guys, like as a group of filmmakers, or let's say a generation of filmmakers, seem to travel a lot internationally. But what was it like to travel inside of the Philippines? Like, were you also able to travel to other cities or other islands?
Yeah,
and
we were.
you know, either make films or show films.
Yeah, we were pretty unrestricted. I think, like Raymond was saying, the medium was invisible. Like now, if you have like a cell phone out on the street, everybody understands that this could show up on YouTube. This could go viral. You know, it has political danger. But before, somebody with like a camera the size of a shoebox was invisible, was not seen as a threat. So we were pretty much unrestricted. At least that's what I would say.
And yes, yeah, we traveled a lot. So we got to shoot in so many locations without permits, just as you saw in Roxlee's film.
Yeah. But I was
It's only
wondering
about-
if the traveling also could happen, for example, in Indonesia in the 80s, to shoot in a village, for example, even if it's relatively far away, is not very easy, because each region has, like in parallel to the civil structure, a military structure. So to shoot somewhere, you have to go through endless like paperwork. Yeah, like red tape is really extremely a hassle for that time.
How big a crew then are you talking about? Are you talking about a 35 mm shoot or like 16 mm shoot? Even 16, huh?
Well, I would say that some documentary production that use 16 millimeter also had to go through that procedure. But there are, of course, some, let's just call them like anthropological filmmakers that went to Sumba or Mentawai, or, you know, relatively more cultural areas where, you know, were a lot visited by anthropologists and art students. They could bring their 8 millimeter camera or 16 millimeter camera relatively freely and shoot without problem. But as so I don't know if it's a matter of situation. Like, for example, I could imagine that shooting a documentary film in those days, like when you use film, is very different from how you can use digital camera now, where you don't have to change reels, and, you know, you can just shoot continuously and cameras get smaller. But in our case, some documentary filmmakers also had to go through that procedure. So I was wondering if you had also to overcome those troubles. Apparently not.
Not as much, but there may have been sensitive areas in the Philippines, of course, like far south in Mindanao, where there was already conflict and more, you know, highly militarized areas as compared to the national capital region and Manila, of course. So it's pretty much free to move around, and yeah, we got away with shooting without any permits. You know.
Yeah, I think, well, I was not involved in any documentary stuff, but a friend of mine was Peter Marquez. He was like working with Egay Navarro, who was with, you know, Eyewitness and stuff like that. And basically it had to do with like how much a foreigner would stick out. So if you're going to like Marawi or something, and then obviously you're a Manileño or something, then you usually have to go pay your respects to the local military outpost or whatever, or to the mayor, say that "Parang we're here," and then you have to acknowledge because you're so visible. But if it was something like you were a local, you brought your own video camera there, you probably would be able to be invisible unless you really went into a hot spot. And then there were a lot of, military there would be like looking around and then noticing you anyway. So it really depended on like how much you stuck out as a foreigner in a particular region.
It depends what kind of film you're making. Let's say if you're going to shoot the rebels or the leftist guerrillas, you have to pay your dues because they will also demand a certain kind of shall we say entrance fee in order to film them, especially if they know you are from a TV crew. No, if you go there as an independent filmmaker saying, "Oh, I'm just shooting, I'm just making a student film." In the first place, I don't know if students will be going to such places to make their films. Yeah. But before, filmmaking was really very, very much centered here in the National Capital Region, here in Manila. I mean, we have a term for it, Manila-centric. You just come in making it in the major city center, which is Manila. So there was no problem. There wasn't much activity shooting in the countryside. But now filmmaking is all over. It's now all over. We call it regional filmmaking. It's all over the country now. So it's all over. So there are now thousands more making films, because of digital technology, which wasn't the
So
case
you really
before.
think this decentralization of filmmaking comes also with the change of technology? Yeah?
Oh yes, it's happening now, and as I believe also in Indonesia, in many parts of the world.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, because you don't need to process your films anymore in the city center. See, you don't need to bring your whole crew from Manila to the provinces, because you can go to if you know the network of filmmakers, you can actually find very good camera crew there in, let's say, in Cebu, in Davao, no, in the countryside.
But
Well, in Indonesia, it happens a lot later, like this decentralized, skilled crew, so to speak. Yeah, started being present from more or less mid 2000s. Like before that, film crew were very much Jakarta centered. Like wherever you go to shoot, you'd bring Jakarta crew over. And it's still largely the practice also today, especially with commercial films. But with independent or alternative films, we really, after the military dictatorship, after Suharto fell, that was also coinciding with this transition from analog to digital. Like professional filmmakers were still shooting in analog film, but activists and independent filmmakers, students were shooting on video at that time, transitioning from Hi8 into the first digital formats like mini DV and stuff. And that's where really we had a decentralization of filmmaking, because people started making films in Jogja, in Surabaya, and also other cities.
I was wondering,
then,
do you have a term? Do you have a word for this kind of decentralized filmmaking? I heard some people say archipelagic filmmaking. Am I correct?
We don't really use it. we don't really use it. There was for some time, because this decentered production also coincided with the rise of like film community, what we call film communities, basically like cinephile clubs outside of Jakarta. So the term that is quite dear to me, because I was going through all these phases, from the very centralized filmmaking to more decentered. was always like film komunitas.
Communities.
Yeah. So we never really term it like archipelago, regional. We never use those terms. It's more like komunitas or alternative.
Community films,
Yes.
community filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And they're done.
So
in
that would be
various
like community theater.
Yes, in a way, it's like something homegrown. You know, like also like theater, where it also very closely connected with language, with local regional language, as well as stories. Also, what kind of regional stories like that was not very present before, like when filmmaking was so centralized. Up until the fall of military regime, for example, legally, with commercial films, you weren't even allowed to do a film in languages other than the national language.
Oh.
Same here.
Yeah.
Same here for a long time. No,
Mm.
here filmmaking was mainly in Tagalog, but now it's splintered into so many languages.
Yeah, but that was not legally enforced, right? That
No,
was
no,
just
no.
because
Just
of
organic.
power. That was just
Organic.
power.
No,
Mm.
yeah.
So
because
for
I
us, we really have like commercial filmmakers had to submit scripts to the Ministry of Information, and those scripts need to be approved, and they need to be in the national language.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and at our national film festival, the Festival Film Indonesia, for I don't remember exactly how many editions, but there was a special award for films in good Indonesian language.
Oh, wow. Meaning like grammar, people spoke well. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
It sounds like
Yeah, that's how
censorship was
sick
much.
we were.
I'm amazed because Indonesia is so much larger than the Philippines, but it seems like the censorship was so much stricter, much fewer holes.
No, but there's also a kind of a stereotype of what filmmaking should be. Like 10 years ago, I met a filmmaker from Davao, no, in Mindanao, south of the Philippines. And then I said, they have their own, they use their own regional language. Then I told them, why don't you make films in your own regional language? Then the filmmaker said, but I thought a film must be made in Tagalog. You know, Tagalog is the main language here in Manila. So they all thought that way, that you must make a film in the Tagalog so it will be understood everywhere. But I say no, you can use your own language, and then you can just put English subtitles.
Yeah, I do think we underestimate, the importance of and the politics of language in our films. I think also colleagues in Malaysia told me that films other than Malay language is very difficult to make. It's bordering on even forbidden to, for example, create a film in Chinese language, like of the dialects that are used in Malaysia. So I do think that even if maybe it's not written in our law, there is a kind of prevailing rules that certain language is more powerful in our cinema than others.
Yeah,
and,
that would be an
production
expression of
is very much centralized in that language setting.
Well, it's happening in China. I think they're trying to extinguish the different dialects in favor of Mandarin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's true.
Oh,
Grace,
I think we've departed so much from Roxlee.
I'm just listening.
I'm actually curious about the ABCD. I go back to that.
Speaking of language, because that's English.
Yes.
A lot of it. And actually, I was gonna point out that like there's examples of regional filmmaking or filmmaking from outside of this Manila, and it's great that Kidlat was like the figurehead of that, independent like filmmaking in the Philippines, coming from outside the capital city. But I have to point out that he actually was making like English language. A lot of his works were English language. I mean, sure, there's a lot of like local languages, but a lot of it was also English. The narration was in English. And Rox's stuff, a lot of it is in English. Like Moron's monologue is in English. Why did you decide for English?
They don't have to put subtitles.
But Rox recently made a short film in Bicolano.
I did know.
Yeah, because actually Rox is not from Manila.
No, even his comic strips, diba? Cesar Azar are originally in English.
Yep.
All of them, just, but some have no dialogues. So no text.
Yeah, that actually was the question. What's the convenience in English?
Doing the convenient. It's convenient to make, for example, comic strip. You don't have to put the dialogue. So just visuals. So everybody can understand.
Well, we grew up with English. No? I mean, we go to school.
Yes, indeed.
We go to schools that teach us.
Yeah, it is a national.
Using English as the medium of instruction.
It's considered one of the national languages.
Yeah.
It's enshrined in the Constitution. I mean, in the laws. So,
Yeah,
So-
in fact, I was going to ask Rox, but I don't know if he experienced it. Rox, tatanungin kita. But because I grew up in Manila, I was always in Manila. You know, I never really traveled much until I was 20 something. So when you travel to the south and, you know, they had other dialects, generally you expect that they speak Tagalog, you know, the Filipino language, which everybody's supposed to learn. But I found a lot of people speaking to me in English because they actually knew more English than Tagalog. They felt more comfortable speaking in English. So that's kind of strange for a Filipino like me who grew up in the city and to find that out. So I don't know if Roxlee felt that way too.
Maybe.
Or alam mo Tagalog talaga? Magaling ka ba mag-Tagalog noon?
Oh yes.
I'm asking Rox if he really was good in Tagalog already before when he was younger.
I used to read the comics. While I was still in Bicol, I speak Tagalog already. So I met people, not so much in English, but they speak in Tagalog, even in the province. So more convenient for me, they talk in Tagalog.
But that maybe also has to do with proximity because Bicol is closer,
Yes,
like
yes,
physically closer,
Yes.
geographically closer to Manila.
Or was it also a practical thing? Yeah, that English is understood well, and especially when you were doing these cartoon strips or maybe even editorial cartoons. I mean, a lot of the newspapers are in English, right?
Yeah, in English.
So the automatic choice of language for the comic strips were English.
So English and Tagalog. Usually you combine the two.
Mix, yeah, it's a mix.
Well, you go to India, no? There's so many cultures, hundreds of languages. But without English, they will not be able to communicate with each other. Same here now.
I think it's also like some older and younger artists also prefer English because they don't like using Tagalog because it's like they're bowing to Imperial Manila. No?
there's that aspect.
Really?
I think definitely around Cebu.
Exactly.
In Cebu, definitely the idea is that English is more of a neutral language. So it's sort of like you speak English, you're speaking a kind of like international language or a kind of lingua franca. Whereas if you speak Tagalog, it's seen as a kind of Tagalog is seen as a as a local language which has unfairly been given kind of imperial power. So that's what it has that connotation in Cebu. I remember another place where English is more popular than Tagalog is like up north. So the Baguio and northern and more north where there's a lot of like missionaries, then often the lingua franca is English. That one. I don't know that that there's a kind of like anti-Tagalog sentiment there the way there is in Cebu and southwards, but that's where that is. Yeah.
But if you go further south, like Teddy mentioned Mindanao, if you go to a certain generation of intellectuals there, they actually speak Malay.
Aha, I didn't know this at all. Bahasa
But
Malay.
maybe
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's also probably this is a question for Rox also. Do you think you make your works or titles in English also because your inspiration references were also mainly coming from this language? Like what kind of films were you watching at that time, or music that you were listening, songs that you sang, books that you read?
Maybe somehow there is some influence, but for some parts, I'm more convenient in using the English as universal language. So
But I think I have to point out
study
that
international.
like Rox's English is not proper English. It's Rox English.
I would actually I'd like to second that, and I would say that like especially I think it was it not Moron's monologue too, but the one about the inventor. Ba yun?
The
The
one,
one
what's that? The one.
the one with the inventor, and then like yung there was a cricket that he would make.
Yes,
Yeah, that one. Ano ba yun?
Yes, it's like a play. You have to play with the insect.
Yeah, it was the insect, and then yeah, he was an inventor, and then the last line was like parang he was last known as a macho dancer. He was parang ganon.
I lost that film.
Yeah,
You
Moron's
lost that
hobbies.
film?
That
Huh?
was not in Super 8.
Moron's
What was-
hobbies.
Yeah, it was lost because
What was it called?
Moron's hobby.
Moron's hobbies.
Moron's Habit.
Yeah.
I really like that film because it was in English, but it was a very very local English, you know, and that was I remember that was I was completely flabbergasted by that because the idea that that just the idea of local English, you know, that there was this sort of like street genius who was like
Yes,
speaking English, you know, obviously he had read science books, so he had like his technology was rooted, came from all these books he had read, but the English was, you know, just
local.
completely local, and that was actually what inspired me to get a very heavily accented speaker for Dumi. You know, it was like a Filipino scientist because we do have local inventors here, and they speak exactly like that, very heavily accented English.
That movie was lost by in the car of John Raymond.
Yeah, I'd heard about that.
Your brother lost it.
It was one of the films that was stolen.
They were stolen. Yeah, I remember.
So
What? Sorry, come again. Like how it was stolen? What?
There
It
was
was stolen?
There was a batch of Super 8 films
yeah,
Inside the car,
that
and the
that
car was broken
submitted.
into.
Yeah, submitted for the Cultural Center of the Philippines Alternative Film Festival. And my older brother John Red was coordinator of one of the coordinators of the festival. And then he had to bring it anyway. Long story short, the car was broken into while it was parked somewhere near Makati,
Mm-hmm.
and then the
Mm.
films were lost. So
Okay.
for a
And
time they were putting out an appeal in case the robbers hear about it. You know, they were
I
appealing.
suspect,
You don't have to return the other stuff you stole. Just return the films, and
and I
but
suspect
Oh.
they were never found again.
one of the
Unfortunately.
suspects, I think it was Marcos man.
Ah.
I was gonna ask, when was this?
It
When,
must have been
80s.
88, 89,
Yes,
88. I think it was 88. 1988.
Because it would have been after I saw it, and that would have I showed up in Mobile Fund around
Hmm.
like 89, something like that.
Several films. I think four reels, Super 8 films
yes, yes.
were
The
lost.
with shooting in
That's the only copy. No,
yeah.
Super 8.
But the Cultural Center of the Philippines paid you, no?
Yeah,
I think they offered some money to just to compensate for this.
Actually, the first film in the program is also lost. The original Super 8 of that is lost. Like Ronong Puti.
Yeah.
Um,
In Tunisia, I think. Oh,
Yeah.
where's the copy?
In Thailand. Actually, Ricky can say more about that
The
because
copy was
they
so-
borrowed that film to make a copy in Bangkok, but then the lab closed.
mm-hmm. And when was this? Ricky, can you tell us more?
Rick is still alive.
Yes.
He unmuted.
Yeah.
Hello, hello.
Oh, there you
Can you
are.
hear
I can
me?
hear you. I can hear you. Yeah.
I think I'm having a bad audio connection. It's
I can hear you
garbled,
fine.
so
No, I can hear you.
Tell
Oh.
us about the lost, Tell us about the lost Ronong Puti Super 8.
okay. I think it was sent to I guess Thailand or Bangkok. It was course to the National Archives. No. What's this? National Film Archives. I think it was. I don't know if it's part of the films that were sent there. What I remember, not only the Super 8, but the National Film Archives also sent the 16 millimeter film for scanning. So I forgot the name of the film laboratory in Bangkok.
There was
I think if it's
Siam. There was Siam. There was Technicolor.
Was it Kodak?
No, there was Siam Lab. Technicolor. Maybe he has trouble hearing us.
His connection hung.
And then there's another one called Katana Lab or Kantana.
It's Technicolor, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
it's Technicolor.
Well, I don't know. Ricky probably knows it much more than I do. Like when you work as a film archivist, it's actually bad to say a film is lost. You always have to say that it's not found yet.
Yes,
we have to believe
yes.
that we can still find it somewhere. But the other titles survived, yeah.
The others.
I mean, like in Rox's filmography, like the one that Tad mentioned, like A Moron's
Hobbies.
like hobbies. Like a lot of it, like the Moron series, that was a lot of these, like very zany. I think it's closely more rooted to his, like it's more a live action version of his comic strips. A lot of these were lost. No, I don't. I haven't seen them. I haven't found them. I've been looking for a while.
I never saw Moron's monologue one. That was already lost by the time I showed up.
No, but we found it in but we found it in Berlin.
What? Really? Well,
Yeah,
in
the
which
one-
case that means that I haven't seen it, and you have it. I want to see it. Nah.
25
It's on the YouTube.
Okay. I saw two, and I saw hobbies.
So the one that was found in 2017. There's hope.
Sure.
Uh,
My very basic question: How can I see it? Comic, animation, film, from comic to animation to film, or the other way around?
I think it's from comics to animation. So it starts first from drawings and then you have to animate it. Especially now in digital format, you can easily do animation from the drawings. And it's not very expensive. So now I'm drawing anything and I try to compile them and then shoot them with the digital cameras.
So it's even drawing first before comic.
Yeah, drawing first, then drawing comics, and then you have to shoot. Where's your dog now? Sleeping?
Do we have any more curious people in?
Lisa has a question.
Yes, sir.
I
Yeah.
have another question for Rox.
Yes.
Would you prefer your audience to watch your films from the start? What if the audience starts watching from the middle if it's shown in a loop? Do you feel it inhibits from the full experience of watching your work? From Lisa Chiquiampo. What do you think, Rox?
You mean in the loop?
Like, what if they watch your films from what if they watch it not from start to finish?
They can watch it from the ending then to the beginning, or they can stop at the middle.
Actually,
They can do anything.
in some of Rox's works, at least the ones we selected for this program of like selections from the 80s, like some of the credits are in the middle.
Some of them are in the middle.
They're not linear. Anyway.
ABC.
Did you also show the film at the Hakawe exhibition? Like any of these short films and as a loop?
Where's the you mean exhibition?
Yes, you did this exhibition in Berlin, right?
Okay, yeah, with
yes,
with Merv.
With David.
Oh yeah, with David T. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It also the same works, the same previous works that we showed in Berlin.
But
I
there were
got some documentary.
And there were two works that were on loop, which were the same works in the program. So ABCD and One Gapang. So they were in the exhibition spaces projections on loop.
Okay.
And then we showed some of them in.
We were able to conduct a workshop there, children's workshop.
Children, yeah. Then Rox did the
very
children's workshop animation.
Very good.
That's on his YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Ricky
Ricky
commented.
has a comment, yeah. One good example is pit optic words and outtakes. What is this example for? Is this the non-linear? Okay.
Also, because Rox, maybe you can talk a bit about that because I don't understand.
It's the optical printing workshop.
But it's actually like a combination of 4 works.
Oh.
It's like a play. We're just playing with the film that we found footages, and then we're just playing with them. So shoot from, I think the films were 35 millimeter. Then we shot it in 16 millimeter through optical printing. So whatever footages we found, we did anything about the film. We combined them and then we finished. I think that was around 6 minutes. So it's a combination of trash films, and then we try to put some colors on it or scratches, slow mo the films, fast forward the films, put experimental sounds. So from that experimental workshop, optical printing workshop, I think Todd was part of the workshop. No, Todd.
Oh, yeah. That was where I made to me.
And Eddie.
Oh, kasama ko dun. The workshop with Christoph.
Yeah,
Christoph. 88.
88. Pero you made sewing before that, di ba? Sewing was...
At Makulangan.
Yeah, at Makulangan na.
Kaya at ba yun? Di ba kasama si Rox dun?
It was
part of split optic.
Yeah, sewing where you saw the films.
Merv, you had a picture of the UNESCO workshop.
Okay.
I wanted to know about music in your film, Rox. How did you choose music? Because they seem to have anything from rock, punk rock, more like regional ethnic instrumentals, and chanting. How do you work with sound and music?
As much as possible, I try to put some raw music, not very professional, but some music that I found in very raw manner. So it's sort of my own composition somehow, and some other. For example, with that lizard, I have to get music from the tape I found. So somehow I'm stealing music from other musicians. That was before, but now I try to make some original music.
I have a comment. Actually, and this is related to like archiving like Rox's works, because when we started me and Shireen and John, when we started archiving Rox's works, we were working with like ugly DVD copies and some VHS. But then we found a way to like get the Super 8 and the 16 transferred, like when we were invited like in different places abroad, like in Toronto, for example. Scott's here. So for one example is like the Super 8 of One Gapang. We eventually transferred that, and One Gapang, the transfers that we knew always had this really like noise, this
Yeah.
Super 8 projector noise.
Yeah, the projector. It was
Yeah.
shut on the wall.
But
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Was the projector sound actually part of it, or you were sort of recording it to video on projection?
Yeah, we cannot find a better way to shoot it. So we just while the projector is running, we have to shoot.
yeah,
We have a word. You know what? We have a word for that in Indonesian. It's called teleding, like telecinema dinding, which literally means wall telecinema.
yeah,
Ding ding. We have that word here too. Yeah.
Yeah.
because the original Super 8 track of that is like has that like Super 8 sound. Like the other films are not like that, but with One Gapang, it seemed like it was a performance. Like it was like a bunch of guys gossiping in the background, and then like music, and the sound of the projector.
Yes.
Until I don't know until how late Reggie Romana, another filmmaker friend of ours, was assisting Rox on tracking one of the films. I forget what it was. It might have been Lizard or something.
Yeah, maybe.
But and then basically it involved playing cassettes and transferring them on the magnetic strip of the film. So
Magnetic
and
strip.
of the film. I think tracking Super 8. Yeah. And then apparently he was like he put a cassette in, and then I think Rox, you just hit the record. You hit the record, and then you stopped the film, stop playback, pulled out the cassette, and then Reg sort of like pressed the stop button because he had planned to rewind the recorder back so that you would record over the part where the inserting the cassette would be erased. And then Rox just basically just said, no, don't do that. And he just leave basically just wanted to keep on playing the cassettes and leave the cassette noise, transferring the cassette noise in. And Rox, Reggie, who just like me worshipped Rox, was completely traumatized by this experience because he had to deal with the idea, was Rox a genius like he thought? Or was he a fraud? Just this story, I remember he told it over and over for years. It must have haunted him for like maybe 5 or 8 years at least. He was completely traumatized by Rox's determination to just leave what he considered dirt in the soundtrack. Yeah, I love that story. I mean, I even loved hearing Reggie tell the story over and over because it seemed like I enjoyed his emotional distress.
I can relay that from Merv, who's archiving. He was screening one of Rox's films and it jammed and Rox just cut it.
Yeah, he tore it. I think with his teeth, right?
Yes. Remember this, Rox?
Screening that place. Where's that? Somewhere in Kansas City.
Yeah, it was in a residency space.
Yeah.
Behind the hospital. I forgot the name. But that was like, I think the goal was to screen your original Super 8 in the original format.
I think that was animation. I think that was animation. I don't forgot the film, but there's still some footages. Only the small part were tore down.
Yes. Yeah, there was no film archive yet. So the works, Rox's works, and a lot of the Mole Fund, and some of like Raymond's works, Teddy's works, Tad's works, they were in Mole Fund at that time. So I borrowed Super 8, Rox's Super 8 from Mole Fund from Ricky. And then Ricky and I checked the films, made sure that the splices were still intact, to make them, to be ready for the projection. And then because, they were old, they jammed. And then like, oh, well, the artist is here and he knows Super 8 better than me. They said like, Rox, you want to, work on this? And then Rox said, oh, that's easy. And then he started biting it. It's just a few seconds, Merv. It's just a few seconds. Like,
I was drunk, maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe that connects to what Tad is saying in the chat box. Raymond and Tad was talking about the credit in the middle. That maybe Rox thought for a moment. Rox thought the film ended already, and then suddenly changed his mind and add more scenes. That's why the credit was.
Yeah, I think that's completely credible. Yeah, Rox doesn't see the films as sacred stuff.
But there's
You don't, Rox?
Well, it reminds me of something Quentin Tarantino said. A film must have a beginning, middle, and end, but not necessarily in that order.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a similarity between Rox and Kidlat there, in a way that a lot of their works are quite performative. You don't read like there's always versions of them. I found 3 intact versions of Lizard in 16 and Super 8, for example, and they're not completely the same.
How are they different?
Just like I don't know, a few frames here and there, I mean, even Raymond reworks his films.
But is it like Rox in the case of Lizard, for example, your work? Do you re-edit your films when they were transferred, or you give it to editors and after that you kind of not control it anymore?
I think I edited it by myself. The Lizard film. So I edited and put some music because that was originally in Super 8 and then transferred to 16 millimeter. So I have the edited.
So you first edited it as 8 millimeter, and then
Yes,
what did you do when you transferred it? Like blow it up to 16?
The movie Lizard was originally in Super 8, so I edited in Super 8 films, Super 8 edited, and then optically printed to 16 millimeter. So it was almost edited when it was done in 16 millimeter. So I just put sound. Because the original Super 8, there is no sound. But when it was transferred to 16 millimeter, I was able to put some sounds. So it was from Super 8 to 16. Very convenient to put sounds.
Yeah. So there you go. Like there are 2 different versions, one without sound and the other with sound. But they are edited, let's say the sequence are the same.
Yes, almost the same sequence.
When you say almost, what's different?
That's what I meant, guys.
There's a difference.
We get it, Elmer.
Yeah.
Okay, this is 11 o'clock in our time. It's 12 in your time. And Ricky is mentioning that there's a beep in the middle of the intact version of split optic words and outtakes that makes it strange.
The sync.
Is it the minus 48 frame beep like this?
Exactly.
We always hear this sound in the beginning of a film that signals it's 2 seconds before the film starts, And that's the point where you actually check the synchronization. Is that kind of beep?
Exactly.
Number 2.
Okay. Good.
This was great.
Yeah.
This was great. Let's do it again.
Yeah, tomorrow. All right.
I'm gonna tell you. We're gonna tell you about another artist. Probably who were practicing a decade before. We started with being curious about Gotot, and then rocks, and now we're going back a decade earlier.
60s?
Yeah, maybe we see more works of other filmmakers, Indonesian filmmakers.
He's not the one we are thinking about. He's not particularly a filmmaker, but he's more known as a literature, actually, a writer.
Yeah, it's okay.
But he does like people from those age, like who does a little bit of everything, but apparently just good at everything. He's one of those guys. We are thinking.
I hate him already.
Yeah, his name is Danarto. He's who we are thinking about for the next edition of this obrolan eksperimental. We'll start with probably reading his short story, which is about multi-dimensional presentations, like from a story about a radio drama, but then change into television, but then change into something that is really in front of your face, something like that. I always think of his short stories as a possible film script. That's why I think he may be the interesting one for our next conversation. I hope to see you guys again.
Thank you so much for this talk, and that we have the chance to witness a reunion. Oh, you got me! Thank you, Rox. Me and my strange background. I'm sorry about that. Cool. Thank you. Cool. What a nice surprise. Yeah. No, I think it was also cool that we had the chance to witness a reunion almost, of movement.
No, definitely.
I tried to get more people. These are the people who could make it. Yeah.
That's really great.
I think if Nick said yes, this would have been a longer discussion.
Yeah, Nick, you can maybe till 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. in the morning.
If
I'd
Nick said
love
yes,
to see
he'd
Nick
be the
in
only
here.
one talking.
Well, all we have to
there's
do
that
is
danger. Yes, I do acknowledge.
all we have to do is have a couple more that people tell him that it's a pity you had to be there, kind of like.
Remember this?
You can approach.
You know what this is?
What is that? Wait, is that a remote control for a TV?
No.
No, it squeaks. What is it?
Light meter.
It looks like yeah.
You have to for.
Wow.
No, they don't use.
But where's the ball?
Where's the sensor?
Yeah.
That explains.
I don't recognize it. Yung second, I've been able to tell, but
No, you took away the sensor,
looks
Rox.
like
This
That's
little
why-
ball.
oh yeah, so it's a third missing. There's a bar at the top.
Yeah.
Oo, dapat may ano sa ibabaw, 'di ba? Kasi hindi ba parang may bilog na puti sa ibabaw.
Oh yes. Some of them. This one has no. You have to put a battery here.
Yeah.
There's a battery.
Okay, this is really funny. So you still keep all your equipments?
I still have some.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so not all, but
Yeah.
you still keep your camera, your light
Trying
meter.
to put up museum.
Cool.
So with all this equipment and all these films.
Mm-hmm. And your drawings as well? Do you keep your drawings?
No drawings.
Well, all the best luck for the museum.
Yeah.
Let me know if you need help.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Over to you, Grace.
Rox, how many paintings did you finish during this 3 months lockdown?
Almost every day. Almost every day.
And posting his paintings every day.
So maybe a week I can paint one.
Wala ka dyan naka-display?
It's already outside.
Sample.
Outside.
All right.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
Sige, kita.
Ano yan?
May
What's that?
comics.
Confucius.